People usually ask me what I learned from other great value investors. And they expect me to talk about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. And I have learned plenty from them. But I also learned a lot from my friends, from value investment friends. There's a saying that and I'm probably true, that you're an average of your 5 closest friends. Today I'm going to talk about my 10 friends. And I'm the average of them, I guess. Actually, I'm at the bottom. I'm at the bottom of them. But what I'm going to share with you, what I learned from value investment friends who taught me a lot over the years. And you can see that, that there is a lot of wisdom lies outside of Buffett and Munger. So I'm going to start with a person who I would say introduced me to investing when I was 24, 25 years old, Michael Kahn, the founder of IMA. And Michael taught me that your investment approach has to fit your personality. That he allowed me to develop into who I am today and allowed me to sculpt my own investment approach. Even though he taught me a lot, he allowed me to evolve into an approach that fits me better. So that's what I learned from Mike. Your approach has to fit your personality, your genetic makeup. My friend Jeff Grothy, he has this incredible talent of taking something very complex and breaking it down into something very simple. Like he loves unit economics. When he looks at a company, he tries to figure out, well, what's the revenue per customer? What's the cost per customer? What's the customer acquisition cost? And that approach, kind of trying to simplify and trying to kind of figure out what the economics into the smallest unit of into like in a per customer or per mile or whatever is actually very, very important. My friend Barry Pasikov, Barry has this incredible gift. Whenever he gets interested into the company or an industry, he does this incredible deep dive where he can spend months reading everything he can find on it. And then what he also does, he takes this incredibly detailed notes. Like he uses OneNote or something, and he creates this incredibly detailed outline. And actually, I'm beneficiary of this because whenever he does a deep dive, all I have to do is just ask him for his notes. And I have this incredible cliff notes in the industry. In fact, I would argue, like when I wrote my book on, like a booklet, not a book, on Tesla, I did something what Barry would normally do. Just kind of go very deep on an industry, on a company, and dig for months. So that's what I learned from Barry, to do that. Steve Gorelick, I mean, he is like the investment stoic. I mean, I've seen him go through times where some of his stocks go through a very difficult time, and you would talk to him about this, and he was extremely objective, talking about the positives and negatives, not being defensive. And I've seen him when something happens bad to his companies, he would logically, tell you the positive and the negatives. He's been logical at the time of the adversity is very difficult and very important. And by the way, the adversity happens to every investor. It's just going through the adversity and maintaining your cool and logic is very difficult. And Steve is my role model when it comes to that. Gary Mashura, Gary and I talk almost daily. Gary is incredibly process-driven. One thing I love about what he does, he tracks thesis for his investment. When he buys a company, he makes certain assumptions, and then every quarter he writes down if this company's business performing according to his the assumptions, according to the thesis or not. And I think this is a great thing to do. Chris Pavis. Chris taught me that a lot of times values, some good ideas lie in plain sight. A lot of times companies that are large and everybody knows about them, there is a value trapped inside of them, and most people just ignore them. When a Chris brings me an idea, I usually a lot of times it's this quirky idea that's everybody knows about it, but Chris is something what others miss. So I love that. Boris Zhilin is that what I love, like what I learned from him, is that he is uncompromising about quality, and he's and he wants to buy companies that grow earnings and high quality companies, and he doesn't want to overpay for them. And he's like, I don't want to use the word dogmatic, but I will use it. But he's very dogmatic about quality and growth, and I really like that. He turned me into a dogmatic about quality for sure. So I I find that my EQ is the highest when I own high quality companies. Simon Denison Smith, who lives in London, a dear friend of mine, and Simon is so thoughtful about his investment process. Like he builds these detailed models for his companies, and then he talks to every executive or industry expert he possibly can to understand the business from different perspective. So I find that whenever I talk to Simon, I learn something all the time. But I like this approach where you try to understand the business, basically people actually running the business at times. Guy Spear actually taught me that you have to control your environment, that the stock market is not your friend. The stock market is going to be there to shrink your time horizon. And what Guy does, he understands that he's just a normal human being who is as fallible as everybody else. So he creates barriers around him, and he creates a special environment where he can be as logical as possible, where the stock market does not enter his life and screws up his EQ or IQ. One thing I did shamelessly copied from Guy. Guy has this, in his office, he has this space, a reading room, where he doesn't bring electronics. He just goes there. There's a lot of books, no electronics, and that's where he reads. I did something similar, but I did kind of the Russian bear version of that. I have this dark room in my office where it's very cold. So it's like, call it a cave. And it has a chair, it has a blanket, it has an iPad that doesn't have like any communication software. It doesn't have Skype, Slack, etc. And this is where I go to read for 4 or 5 hours a day, every single day. And of course, it has my father's art on the wall as well. But so that's how I shamelessly copied Guy there in that regard. Jim Chanos is not a value investor, traditional value investor. But I would argue he's kind of a value investor because value investors want to buy undervalued companies, while Jim Chanos wants to short overvalued companies. Okay, so what I really appreciate about Jim's approach, how open he is to learn what the opposite view is. A lot of times what happens to us, we learned our view, like we become bullish on the company, we don't want to hear what anybody else has to say that contradicts our view. Well, Seneca said, time discovers truth. So as an investor, you want to just discover truth before time does. So as an investor, you want to help others, not just to tell you things that agree with you. In fact, that probably has the least amount of value. You want others to tell you things that may disagree with your thesis. And if you disprove them, then it just makes it a better investment. So what I learned from Jim, he always welcomes opposing views. He is a short seller. He would love to hear what people who loan the stock love about the company. So these are the things I learned from my friends. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have a lot of wisdom, but there's a lot of wisdom lies in people who may not be in the Wall Street Journal headlines every day.